Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. James Church is the co-founder of Robot Mascot, a company that helps businesses prepare for investment. He's found that by being the speaker at a networking event or conference, then even more people will want to talk to you. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, James.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, your current business is all about helping business owners to prepare for investment. But first of all, let's talk about your background and how you came to be doing what you're doing. What was your first job?
My first job, wow. I studied graphic design. So my first job was in a brand and advertising agency doing packaging design for Lidl, the supermarket. Was one of the main jobs. So yeah, strange journey from there to what I do now, which is helping founders raise investment.
So what was it that sort of drew you to marketing and that sort of field in the first place?
I think the creative side of it, but there was also a good amount of kind of logic and reasoning and data behind it as well. So it was kind of getting your hands dirty, doing stuff that was creative, but there was also kind of a reasoning and a strategy behind it as well. So my mind is very much sort of 50% of one, 50% of the other. I love a spreadsheet as much as I love a sketch pad. So yeah, that really appealed to me. So sort of get into both sides of it.
Yeah, that's probably quite unusual, actually. So many people who are, creative shy away from the whole, spreadsheet kind of thing, don't they?
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of my superpowers and why it led to the development of things over a number of years, from sort of pure design into brand strategy, into marketing strategy, and then into kind of combining all of those things to create a niche product around raising investment, and then starting to understand financial models and spreadsheets and balance sheets and all of those sorts of things, which is never something I thought I'd be doing or even interested in, quite honestly, if I think about myself back at university or my first job. But such is life. You go through these journeys, don't you?
Yeah. And so at what point in your career did you decide to make the leap and start your own business?
Well, I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. My first rodeo really was at university. I was freelancing on the side. I went and spent a lot of time hanging out in the sort of innovation centre that they had at the uni, where there was lots of people trying to sort of start their own business from various courses, and was sort of hanging around there and started picking up some design jobs, doing logos and websites for those students, and I had a little business doing that. Then I got my first job, and I was still kind of freelancing on the side. I was doing stuff for the local butcher and those types of jobs, and then then over time got made redundant from a role, and kind of that, at least I had the freelancing as a bit of a backup. So that became my full-time gig, and then from there it became a business, and we started, my co-founder, or the founder of Robot Mascot that I'm with now, we co-founded a business together before Robot Mascot called Craft Associates, which was a massive failure, but learned a lot from it, and then we came back with Robot Mascot a few years later. So yeah, it's always been kind of something I've really enjoyed, and I kind of remember going off to university and sort of doing that classic kind of go for a final kind of drink down the pub with my dad before I flew the nest type thing. And he asked me, like, what do I really want from life? What do I want once I finish this degree? And I remember sitting there and saying, I'd love to have my own agency one day. I'd love to have my own business. I think it's always been something I've wanted. I don't really know why. It's just always been sort of, something in me that's wanted that.
Yeah. So when did Robot Mascot come about then, and how did it come about?
Yeah, so it came about, it must be about 10 years ago now. And it was founded, as I say, by my business partner, Nick Ruston, who's a brand strategist, expert around branding. We'd met in my first job when I was doing those little packaging designs. He was a brand strategist in that agency, and we kind of got working together on some projects there. And it was one of those classic moments down the pub He'd recently been made redundant from an agency I was at the time employed, but doing a bit of freelancing on the side, and it was just like, look, let's, he'd been doing Robot Mascot for about 12 months, I think, at this point, and we made plans for me to join him in the next sort of 6 months or so. So sort of 18 months in, I joined him as co-founder, and we sort of built it up together from there, really.
Yeah. So tell me what Robot Mascot does, and where did the name come from as well?
Yeah, so it's my co-founder. You have to thank for the name, Nick, being the brand guy. So Robot. We started life as a brand agency, a full service brand agency, focusing on brand communication, and Robot was very much a nod to the fact that the type of clients we wanted to attract pioneers, we wanted to attract future thinkers. We didn't want these sort of stuffy, boring businesses that wanted to do the same as everyone else. We wanted people to have to want to kind of push the boundaries. So Robot was a reflection of kind of these future thinkers and innovators that we wanted to attract.
Yeah.
But obviously we're a service industry, and when you think about robots in sci-fi films, they tend to be the bad guys. They're taking over the world. All of the stuff around AI right now, and how that's going to take over the world, that it's got a negative connotation often. And we were very much like, the ethos of the brand was always to be the friends and allies to business owners and founders going through this journey. To be the biggest fans and the supporters of these individuals, and be their guide, and Mascot kind of represented that. We're their guide, we're their biggest fan, and so those two things together sort of made a really interesting and unique kind of name, and we ran with it, and it's been quite successful. We get quite a lot of attention from it.
Yeah, I should think it's quite a talking point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get asked this question a lot,
Yeah,
so
I'm
yeah,
sure.
it definitely is. But yeah, in answer to the other part of your question, as I said, we started life as a full service kind of branding agency. We were doing logos, websites. We were doing TV campaigns. We've done some radio campaigns, all kinds of things. But a lot of our clients were startups, and they were looking to raise investment. They were seeking funding. And because we'd designed their logo, written their website, they asked us to do their pitch decks for funding. And we were a startup ourselves, and like any work is good work.
Yep.
So we took it on, didn't really know much about it. We'd watched a few episodes of Dragon's Den and kind of figured, how hard can it be? So we started putting some pitch decks together and done a lot of research on what was required, put them together, and some of our advisors at the time were angel investors, and they said, look, this is really great what you're doing. Like, if every pitch that landed in our inbox looked like this, it would make our lives so much easier. You should package this up. You could have something really quite niche here that you could expand. It's a massively growing sector. Like, there's huge amounts of money being pumped into sort of tech startups. You should really look into this. So we spent 12 to 18 months researching this, interviewing investors, talking to founders who had successfully and unsuccessfully raised, and tried to figure out exactly what makes a good pitch deck, a good set of investment materials, kind of what the process looks like, and all of those things. And that's what ultimately culminated in my book, Investible Entrepreneur, which became a bestseller. Mapped out this methodology and this research we created, and was kind of resulting in our clients being 40 times more likely to raise investment. And once that book was launched, we then made the decision to sort of do a full pivot from brand agency that did some work on people's pitch materials to a full investment readiness agency that focused only on that. So yeah, it was a bit of a journey.
Yeah.
It took us about 5-6 years to get to that point, from launching as a full service branding agency to fully pivoting into an investment readiness agency. And there was a good sort of 3 years where we were sort of doing both, and we had a foot in both camps, and then we made that full pivot over.
Yeah. So who are your clients these days? Are they generally in the tech sector, and what kind of size companies do you deal with?
Yeah, it's a real mix. Like, I would say probably about 80% of our clients are tech related. They're doing something in tech or with tech, or they're leveraging technology in some way. And then the other 20% would be kind of FMCG, like fast moving consumer goods, like food and drink brands. Hospitality would be another sector, restaurants and that kind of thing. So those type of more consumer brands, agencies, consultancies, that kind of thing is probably the other 20-30% of the work. So yeah, and they're all fairly early stage. So don't know your listeners' kind of understanding of the terminology in fundraising, but you've got kind of 3 early rounds of investment that are called pre-seed, seed, and Series A, and that's where we focus. So it's that first round of funding to get the concept off the ground, or that second round of funding once you've proved the concept and you need to kind of really establish yourself in the market, and then that third round of funding when you've got that base laid down and you're looking to scale up to the first sort of 1 million or 2 million in revenue. So it's those first kind of 3 rounds of investment that we focus on.
Yeah. Now, this might sound like an obvious question, or maybe it's not. How does a business know when it's ready for investment?
Yeah, so there's a lot of founders out there that feel like they have a right to investment just because their idea is so great, right? And obviously that's not the case. A lot of founders, a lot of investors are looking for something a bit more established than a concept that you might have had and not done much with. So generally speaking, for the first round of investment, you would be looking for no more than sort of 250 to 300,000 to really establish the product or test the product. So you might build a very early version of whatever the product is you're building, and then you would test it in the market with some beta testers, some first customers. Maybe they're paying it for it, maybe they're not, but you're kind of testing the market. So as long as you've got enough evidence in place that you've done kind of research, focus groups, surveys, you've really considered the value proposition of the concept. You know you've done your research with your target market. You understand exactly what they need to solve their problem. You've perhaps put some very simple wireframes together, or you've put a brochure together for your service, and you've got sort of letters of intent, or you've got people kind of saying, yes, I'd love, if this existed, I'd love to use it. If you've got a body of kind of evidence to suggest that this is a goer, this is something the market wants, this is something the market needs, then you can probably raise your first kind of round of investment to kind of kickstart the growth. If you just had an idea and you want that money to fund your time to go and find all those things out, it's going to be really, really tough for you to raise investment. You kind of have to do some of the legwork yourself at your own risk first before you go and get someone else to risk their cash on you.
Yeah.
Think of it this way, like everyone you're going to ask for investment, that's their kid's inheritance that you're asking them to gamble on your idea.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you've done enough due diligence on yourself and your own idea to ask someone to risk their kid's inheritance on you and your concept, then you're probably ready to go and raise investment. But if you can't sit there and honestly say, I've put enough of my own sort of blood, sweat and tears into this to justify risking that individual's capital, then you're probably not ready to go and raise.
Yeah, I think that's a good test.
Yeah.
So how do you help your clients? What are the sort of services that you offer them?
Yeah, so basically we help an individual or a founding team to prepare for the investment round. So we're going to need to pull together a business case documented as like a business plan for the investors to read through and really understand kind of what your strategic plans are in the short and the long term, kind of with their money, but beyond that, like once you've spent all their money, what happens next? Documenting what that then looks like financially as a set of 5-year financial forecasts, and then pulling all of those things together into a clear, concise and articulate pitch deck that engages the investor, gets them to want to take a meeting with you, gets them to want to have a conversation with you about the plan that you've put together. So they're the 3 main things that we do really is business plans, financial projections and pitch materials to prepare a founder for investment. And then the final thing is obviously you've got to go find some investors to pitch to. So we have investor outreach services where we can kind of outreach en masse to high net worth individuals and angel investors and such like to get your proposition in front of them so that you've got a big pool of potential investors to go and invest in your idea.
Yeah. And so how successful has this been? How many companies have you helped now over the years?
I mean, we've supported over 3,000 founders to date, from all over the world. Clients in the UK, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Australia, literally all over the world have been using our services. As a general average, they're 40 times more likely to raise investment than the sort of industry average when we look at the data. So the approach we use, the approach that we've researched and I've documented in that book, really is really is a game changer. It really does make a huge difference to your chances of securing the cash you're looking for.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned your book earlier on, so let's just talk a little bit more about that. What's the title of it, and what will people learn from it?
Yeah, so it's called Investible Entrepreneur, how to convince investors your business is the one to back. And basically, they're going to learn a 6-step strategy to position yourself as what I call an investable entrepreneur. And I define an investable entrepreneur as one of the top few percent of founders who are successfully raising investment, because it's about a 1% success rate of businesses end up securing investment. So you need to be in that top 1%, and you need to position yourself to give yourself the best chance of being in that top few percent. And that's what this is all about. It's about how to use communication skills, how to use business strategy skills to really articulate your proposition in a way that engages the investor, gets them excited about what you're trying to build, reassures them that you're going to be a trustworthy individual with their capital. You're going to be able to actually execute on what you plan to do, as well as, it's not just about a great idea. You've got to back that up with a solid strategy. So it's all those things, it's those tactics you need, and it's split into sort of the 6 principles of the perfect pitch, I call them, and we take you through those 6 principles.
Lovely. So let's have a chat about networking now then. What's your approach to networking?
I mean, my approach is very much to never expect a client or a sale from networking. Yeah. I've always approached it as a partnership building exercise.
Yeah.
And if you end up with a client out of it, great. But I found it's a much better approach to go into that room, prepare yourself with a really solid, and I would say this, a really solid kind of 30-second pitch that sparks interest, gives you credibility, sets the scene for your business, and then just let them talk and talk about partnerships. How can we help each other? What can I do to support you? How can we collaborate in some way? And that's where the magic happens, because then you end up with a long-term partner who gives you access to their client base or whatever, and you can cross-fertilize those. I spent every month we try to do an event with one of our partners, where we do a joint event and or event swap. So we'll do an event to our audience that hosts them, and they'll do one to their audience that hosts us, and we're just constantly swapping leads, swapping contacts through doing those sorts of activities, and that's how we grew our business in the early years, before we had budgets for Facebook ads and all of that kind of fancy stuff. It was all just partnerships, leverage other people's brands to benefit your own, and do that kind of swapping of content, swapping of events, swapping of ideas and individuals and referrals and all of that stuff, was much more successful than hunting down clients from a networking perspective.
Yeah. And so what kind of networking events did you go to find those partners?
All sorts of events. So there would be, certainly in our industry, there's a lot of free pitch events where founders are pitching their ideas. So we'd go to a lot of those and start talking to various individuals. Once the book got launched, it became much easier to be a speaker at those events or on a panel at those events, and that completely changed the game, because everyone wants to speak to the person on the stage. So then you got queues of people wanting to speak to you afterwards. But it was mainly those sorts of events. It was kind of conferences. It's less success with those sort of formal, I'm not going to drop any names, but those formal kind of membership type networking events when you all go for a breakfast meeting in the morning and kind of it's the same people every week, and I'd had less success with those, if I'm honest, and had more success with going to just industry events and chatting with people and then following up afterwards and sort of taking it out of the room. That was certainly what worked for us.
Yeah, and I think you're right about, if you can be the speaker, that's a great way to get people to want to talk to you afterwards, isn't it? How do you go about? Obviously you've got your book that you can talk about. Are there any sort of other hints and tips you can give to people about how to be the speaker in the room?
Yeah, personal brand is very much a big part of it. So it doesn't need to be a book, but it could be, regular posting of content on LinkedIn or on a blog, thought leadership. I've come up with a really sort of useful and speedy way of kind of getting this content out. Like I write every couple of weeks I do 2-3 minute YouTube videos. So I script them out. It takes maybe an hour to script out a 3-minute video on a subject, and usually this is inspired by a couple of conversations I'll have had with a client or a prospect at some point during the week, and I was like, everyone should know that. So then I'll write a 3-minute YouTube video script. I'll record it on my laptop, just talking head video, send the script and the video off to a copywriter who will then transcribe that and turn it into a full blog post, and then send that off to a social media kind of freelancer who will split that up into, turn the video and the content into 5 social media posts, and then that just goes out every week. So you do 3 minutes work and you send it off to different individuals. You end up with a blog post and a whole week's worth of social content, and you post that out onto your LinkedIn or whatever, and you just do that regularly and consistently. And I've been doing it now for probably 3-4 years, and you slowly build up. I built up from a few thousand followers on LinkedIn to almost 10,000 followers now, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's just that snowball effect. So being that thought leader and thinking about, and the best way to do that I find is to have sort of 2 or 3 kind of categories that are big categories that you kind of position yourself to care about. So for me, for example, it would be how to convince investors your business is the one to back. If it's anything to do with that, I can write about it. Anything about great ideas, not raising investment, or communication and how we talk. And they're like my 3 lanes. And I can talk about any of those things in any different way. And that gives me kind of a bit of a focus on what goes out there. And also never talk about your service or your offer. Just talk about, give advice, give tips, give useful information, and then you build that personal brand, and then you've got something to go out and say, look, I've got all this content, I've got these do a speaker page. I've got a speaker page with 3 or 4 different talking topics of like, these are my go-to talks, and they're the same every time. And these are what you can book me for, basically. So I can go and approach an event and say, look, do you want to give me a talk? Do you want me to do a talk? Here's 4 subjects I could speak on. Which one do you want? And I'm not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. It's just kind of repeat that same message until you're sick of it. I've been doing the same pitch now for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm sick of it. But every time someone else hears it, it's brand new to them, and they're excited by it. It's a bit like Coldplay, right? They must be sick of singing Yellow by now. Like they couldn't care less. They really don't want to sing that anymore. But you just have these things you become known for, and it just snowballs over time.
Yeah. Absolutely. So before I let you go, I understand that you've got an offer for our audience. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, if anyone's thinking of raising investment or wants to explore what that might look like for them and their business, if they go to pitchready.co.uk, they can take a short quiz. It takes sort of less than 5 minutes or 3 to 4 minutes. And from that, they'll get a 12-page tailored report on their investment readiness with hints and tips on what to improve to make themselves more investor ready. And they'll also get access to a free copy of my book, which they can receive in the post, or they can download a copy or access an audiobook, all for free. And they'll also get invited to a 90-minute fundraising strategy session that I run every week, a group-based session where they can really sort of dive deep into how to raise investment. So yeah, all of that just by going to pitchready.co.uk.
Fantastic. And if people want to connect with you personally, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the where I hang out most, but I do post regularly on all the main ones: Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. But yeah, LinkedIn is where I hang out most, so that's probably the best place to get me.
Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much for being my guest. That's been really insightful, and the best of luck with your next speaking slot.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.